Alright, so what I'm doing here is I am siliconing a background onto this tank. I've already got some pieces of slate that are affixed to the background here. And what I'm going to do is actually use some of these stacking stones to silicone them against the back. What I'm doing is creating a cage for some Tibetan frog-eyed geckos. And what I want is for the top half of this cage to be a bunch of rocky ledges, because I'm going to actually use some Zoom-Ed excavator for the rest of the cage to kind of keep it, to give them some areas to burrow in. But for this top half here, I do want them to have these ledges to climb on. So I'm going to silicone a whole bunch of them and create a background that way. I am using these stacking stones because they're lighter weight than actual rocks. So that way this cage doesn't end up so heavy that I can't actually lift it or work with it. So first things first, you got to get your Zoom-Ed silicone. All of this out here. I got a couple different colors just to make it look visually interesting. Now we put stuff in. What I'm doing here is I'm just adding a thin bead of silicone. And then you stick it in right in there. And I'm just going to go through the whole cage like that. Alright, so this is what it looks like once you get it all added in there. And I'm going to be using a spray adhesive. We use this here in the store. We actually use this for the big custom vivarium that we built. I'm going to use that to kind of add some excavator to the back and make the back of the tank all nice and textured and look neat. And then in a little bit we're going to do the excavator all along the bottom of the cage, all around here. We'll see how that goes. Alright, so now I'm going to start putting in the excavator. First things first is you have to make it. Got it here in my bowl. And I'm going to add some water. This is kind of the fun part, is you get to get your hands all nice and goopy and dirty. Yeah, you pretty much just want to add the water and just mix it all in with your excavator so that it starts holding a shape. That is what you're going to use to make all the stuff in your cage. For this stuff here, it looks like I need just a little more water. So here's kind of the end process version of the tank. So I've got these two tubes here that I'm using to hold the shape of these burrows in place, and a couple of burrows that I kind of hollowed out with my hands that I'm actually going to fill with a little bit of sandy soil for these guys. The Tibetan frog-eyed geckos do like a bit of a drier climate, so this is going to work really well when I mix it with some sandy soil so they can kind of dig their own burrows. And you can see all the neat little ledges in there, and I've got a little bit of excavator in there too. So, and then the last thing I did is up here, it's actually pretty thin, a very thin layer. Go around here. So you can see that it's a really thin layer. I'm actually going to be putting a heat pad right there, and I wanted to make sure at least one spot of excavator was nice and shallow enough that the the geckos would actually be able to feel it. So there we go. Made sure that I had a nice flat spot here for the water bowl, which fits in nicely. And there we go. So that's, now I just got to let it dry for a little while. It'll take about a couple days. I'm going to be off from this I'm not going to be working at this location for the next few days, so it'll be able to stay here hidden. So I won't be able to mess with it and kind of ruin it by tweaking with it too soon. So that's pretty much it. There we go. And we'll check in here in a couple more days. Alright, so here's the finished product. There's the cage. I took out the paper towel roll that I had here, which has resulted in this perfect little cave hollow there. And then you can actually see that there's another hole that comes in the corner there. And then I was going to take this out, but I actually can't get it out. So the excavator kind of hardens a lot like cement, so once something's in there pretty good, it's kind of stuck. So now that I've got the excavator itself pretty much hardened and set here in the cage, I'm going to add a sandy soil mixture. It goes to burrow into. And that way that'll actually give them the opportunity to dig in and create their burrows themselves in a way. So go ahead. Alright, so I'm using the white Vita sand and some of the Zoom Med Eco Earth to create this mix of about 50-50 sand and coconut. Basically, I don't want to use straight sand because it's a little bit too dry, but this mixture gives them something really nice that they can burrow in without being too dry or too wet. And it's really, really similar to kind of the environment they live in the wild. I was reading a study about where they're from, not only some in Mongolia, but basically the entire kind of genus. And these guys are from a very relatively dry area that has only moderate spikes in humidity in the morning and at night. So I kind of mimic that with this kind of nice dry, very similar to where they'd be from in the wild, kind of sandy soil mixture. So I'm going to go ahead and take it. And now, sit here and add this to the cage. Alright, so I added about half of a 5-pound bag of sand, and then about a quarter of a bag of the 8-quart Eco Earth. And that's about how much it filled it up. I kind of tossed them up there, got into the tube, covered up a few of the holes that I made. Kind of covered up that one too, so they have somewhere to go. So it looks really plain and simple right now. And then what I'm also going to do is grab some of the sand and just kind of sprinkle it in there to kind of make it look a little bit neater. So you see it's getting it up there on the slate. Because the sand actually tends to kind of sink below the Eco Earth, so over time the sand will actually kind of just sift downward. So adding a little bit extra will help make sure that over time the cage still kind of maintains this nice look to it. So there we go, kind of plain and simple. And now I'm going to go see if there's any succulents that I can put in here. I'm not sure what we have in stock right off the top of my head, but we'll go see what else I can add in here. Alright, so I added one succulent plant, and then if you remember I said that up at the front here I wanted them to be able to get close to the heat pad I was going to put on the cage. So what I did is I've got this piece of cork that actually fits right snugly on the bottom of the substrate, and it's actually hollow underneath, like that. So it's just barely big enough that they can kind of fit in there, and it wedges in all nice, and it's got a little hollow there so they can come out. And then I put another piece back up there for them to hide under, and then there's all these slate ledges for them to climb on. So there we go, that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and toss on a bit of background just for those last bits of gaps in the glass, and then we'll light it up and see how this looks. Alright, so we've got the light on the cage now, and there's the final product. We've got water there, there's going to be a heat pad right under here. All that's left is to add the geckos.
Take care, you have a good
So Tibetan frog-eyed geckos like these are really neat little geckos. They actually will shake their scales off at you in a defense mechanism, and they can actually rattle their tail when they're really stressed out. These little guys here have been eating crickets and mealworms. They'll also eat roaches if you let them, and I'm sure once they got big enough, they'd probably eat pinkies too. They can be gnarly little geckos, which is one of the reasons I like them so much. Because their scales do come right off if you grab them wrong, I don't recommend getting these and handling them. However, if you're very calm and cautious, as you can see, they can sit in your hand just fine. But their skin and their scales are very sensitive, so you don't really want to mess with them too much. Come on, buddy.
Any questions, bro? You kind of browsing?
He's decided he's my friend right now. There you go. Whoop. So they've got this. I'll let them hang out in it for a few days, take it into the new office, and let them kind of excavate their own new burrows. They're really cool little geckos, and I really recommend them if you want just a nice little display animal to check out. There you go. That is the completed Tibetan frog-eyed gecko setup. And again, the sources of heat is just going to be a heat pad down here. I may or may not put a basking light on there. It depends on just how cold they get. And then up top, I've got their light here, and I've got a Zoom Ed 5.0 compact fluorescent on them just for a little bit of supplemental UVB. You don't necessarily need it, but I do think they do better when it's offered to them. So there you go. Those are my pair of Tibetan frog-eye geckos in their new custom excavator habitat. Everything you see in here you can actually order on our website at www.LLLReptile.com.